Thank you both for being here. Carson, I'll start with you. As you were saying earlier, of course, this movie clearly arises from a deep love and knowledge of baseball. Can you just talk about your history, personal history with the game, and at what point you realized you wanted to make a feature out of it, about it?
Yeah, so I've been playing my whole life. At one point I wanted to be a professional player. And at some point I think I realized that wasn't gonna happen. And around high school, I kind of got tired of the competitiveness and the swagger. And at that age, you know, everybody just wants to one-up each other. So I grew tired of it. I got exhausted. I got into films. Hard pivot. And then, you know, it was probably like I moved across the country to Los Angeles, and then that old hankering came back because the weather's always nice. And I joined a rec league, much like the one on screen here, because I just felt like I missed the sport so much. And the relationship that people have to the game at that age relative to when I was younger, it's completely different. It's about people spending time with one another and you know, enjoying a shared passion together. And nobody's really trying to make the majors, you know, and everybody's also falling apart physically, mentally, all the above. And so I felt like it was this beautiful, I realized something about the way that people use recreational sports to come together and build a community that wasn't there when I was younger. And I felt like there's so many baseball films, of course, and none really have really spoken to that in a way that I would find satisfying. So that's when I started thinking about, okay, what's my way to tell this story? There's a great film called Goodbye Dragon Inn that's a huge influence for me, which is about the closing of a cinema. And I wanted to find I wanted to find my version of that film, basically. So it's the closing of a baseball field. And I think that baseball and cinema, are the fate of both, are sort of interconnected in a way. They're always being pronounced dead, and then they're coming back, and they persist. They just persist. So.
I just love that Goodbye Dragon Inn, and I love the idea of making a Tsai Ming-liang baseball movie. You know, I wanted to ask you about just the writing of the script. I mean, I think it is a very intricately constructed script in terms of the rhythms, the comic rhythms of the dialogue, the just the myriad little interactions among the characters, and the plotting of this game as it unfolds. And how did you put the puzzle of the script together?
It's a good question. It was a very long process. I wrote it with two of my co-writers, which let's just give them a hand, Michael Basta and Nate Fisher. These two guys are two of my best friends, and we basically wrote this out as a box score, like of a baseball game. We sort of started writing an outline, and we had to figure out what happens in each inning, and then once you've figured out what the game is, you're like, what are significant game actions that we actually need to focus on? And why? And we got to figure out what's relevant to the story. And when do we actually cut away? And so we really broke it down and made sure that no passage of time was unaccounted for, you know, whether we're in the stands or we're on the field. And I feel that every beat on the field is there for a reason. It's deepening your understanding of certain characters, or it's laying little breadcrumbs for later. And so, I mean, we wrote this all together very meticulously. Each it's like I'd write a line, he'd write a line. Sometimes we would take specific scenes and kind of handle them on our own, but we'd always come back together and figure out what was working and what wasn't. But of course, once we actually cast everyone and brought everyone to this field, I mean, everything started to mutate a bit. And the way that it was part of my strategy to put this entire wonderful cast together in like a Boy Scout cabin in the woods. And so they'd have to live together in the woods. You guys know what Fisher cats are? They're in New Hampshire in the woods. I think they chased my cast a few times. Anyway, yeah. So they all formed such a bond that eventually they started to diverge from the script, and we allowed it, kind of embraced it, or found different ways to say certain things. But I mean, we have Nate and Mike are so funny, and Nate's a stand-up comedian, and he thinks in terms of these wonderful setups and then punchlines, and I think we try to keep that structure to a lot of the dialogue, while also allowing for these sort of mundane beats to take place as well.
It's interesting because you're talking about like accounted for, making sure every time is accounted for, because you're trying to evoke the duration of a game that, of course, in this movie and just in general can go very long, but you do it very concisely within 98 minutes. It's a tricky thing to pull off. And talking about casting, how casting an ensemble of at least two teams worth of actors and then some. How did you find them? And I'll bring you in here, Keith. How did you and Keith come together in casting him as Ed?
I'll go first, maybe.
Yeah, you should. I'm not quite sure how that unfolded. Yeah.
Well, Mike and I cast this actually ourselves from California. Actually, we live in California, and we were doing all the casting remote for the most part. A lot of it through Backstage, and then through friends of friends and people we'd worked with before. A lot of actually friends from home, people that I thought would be great in a movie. That I just wanted to bring into and just add to the color and texture of this ensemble. And it was the biggest challenge of casting this film was, at first I had this idea that the movie was about seasoned vets that know how to play the game. And they're falling apart, but they have a real sense of how to move and the gestural language of the game. And then I realized, so I start casting remotely, and I'm like, I don't know how that people play. I was like, you want to throw a ball on screen for me? doesn't tell you much. Then we got out on the field, and I realized, okay, there's a wide variety of skill level here, which is great. The acting is phenomenal, but we have to now embrace that this film is about people, just enthusiasts who've lost it along the way. And
Be very careful there.
Well, take it away. How was it?
As far as, well, look. Anyway, the truth be told, I walked on the field and I limped off. I found out that I wasn't what I used to be, for sure. But as far as the casting on the film and how everyone basically got together is a story in itself. Like, for instance, since this, the Eephus family has been together constantly talking about. I could tell you stories about quite a few of these gentlemen. I'm not going to mention any names. I know their life history. I know their children. I know their grandchildren. I know what they've been through. There's something about baseball that brings people together. And we're examples of that, because I didn't know any of these guys. I didn't know anything about them. And in a matter of 3 weeks, I knew everything about them. And we even discussed life, things that were going on in life, and made some life decisions in the dugout. The dugout does something to you. It opens you up. And I think that's what we're getting at here. The connection between baseball and community. It just pulls people together. It really does. People you walk by every day. You say maybe 1 or 2 words to, if you say anything at all. And then, but when you're on the field, you're like best buddies.
It's a good time to mention that we played I think the first baseball game in the history of New York Film Festival yesterday on the East River.
Yes.
Between everyone in the cast and crew that's here. Unfortunately, my team blew the lead and lost. And you got an infield hit, though.
I did. I actually slipped, but that's okay. I got a bunt out of it. And I think I even caught something, didn't I?
Yeah.
Oh, I
don't know.
Yeah.
We
had a good time, and we actually got to find out who the better team was. And we were nose to nose, but somebody got lucky.
I love the stories of John Ford sets when everyone was on Monument Valley together in campsites, and everyone becomes a family. And that's really what this film felt like when we were there. It's truly just so fun.
I think we feel that very much in the movie, which is a great hangout movie, and there's such a wonderfully relaxed vibe to it. But of course, talk a little bit about the shooting of it in terms of, because you're capturing plays and outcomes with great precision, and it's I imagine it was a lot of work in addition to kind of having this hangout vibe to it.
Yeah, we shoot in a lot of master shots in this film, trying to choreograph body. Like, to some extent, you can never control how these men will move around. Like, you don't know how the play is going to turn out. That time when he does a sacrifice bunt and he falls and someone else falls, like that's you can't really plan for the way that unfolds, but you can shoot it wide and have an idea of what you might want to capture, and then you let the spontaneity happen in the frame. And this was like a highly choreographed and shot listed film, actually. Me and my cinematographer, Greg Tango, round of applause. Somewhere over there. We went over, I went to the field with a camera and just shot like every frame of this film at what I thought would make sense. And he and I got together and we made these storyboards, composited in Photoshop with these figures throughout the frame to kind of figure out what was working, and also study where the sun was going to be at any moment, because it's important that we get a sense of the shadows are falling in a consistent way. So, we did shot list this to an intense degree. And then, of course, once you get on the field, everything changes. It starts raining. It was the rainiest October in that town in the last 2 decades or something. We did the weather research, and it was just so everything sort of life just throws all these missiles at you, and you have to dodge them. And then we had to change the shot because someone didn't make it to set that day, and they're not going to be in the background, so we got to dress up the PA and put them in the background. So you have an element of precision, and then it's colliding with the chaos and uncertainty that inevitably happens when you have how many people? 60 people on set, 40 people. I don't know. It depends on the day, but
keeping continuity must have been killer for this too.
Yeah, shout out to Mike Basta again. Scheduling this film was insane. Every night we go back to the house we're staying at and had to basically reschedule the new day. I mean, it was crazy.
Well, your and Greg's work is really exquisite. I mean, the movie looks beautiful, and you have much experience as a cinematographer, having shot other features. And you wore a lot of hats on this movie. In addition to writing, directing, you edited and co-produced, and I know worked on the soundtrack as well. Can you talk a little bit about just throwing yourself into every possible role you could?
Yeah, I mean, I've always worked with frugality in mind. I've for my whole life, I've never had a studio budget or anything, and hopefully that changes eventually. But anyone? Yeah, so it's so I've just gotten, I think as millennials, we grew up in an era where you have these cameras at your disposal, and you kind of just learn all the tricks of the trade, and you develop your language and your voice by using by basically occupying every role at some point in the process. And I also just want to shout out Omnes Films is the production company on this film, and that is a collective of very close friends of mine. We kind of all work on each other's projects and trade roles. And Tyler Taormina, you mentioned, I've shot his films, and he produced here. And David Enton has produced many of the films. Mike is always on board, and it's just this rotating gallery of creatives, and we all come together very early in the process. We worked on this film for so long. We wrote it for so long, and we're thinking about it for so long. The music and the pace and the tone was so vivid in my mind. And there was no one breathing down our neck to finish the film at a certain point. So it allowed me the luxury to just get everything exactly how I wanted it.
I want to ask about, there are at least two very different legends in this movie. One of them is the great Frederick Wiseman, who has a voice role in the film. Can you talk about landing Fred Wiseman?
Yeah, well, Fred is he's one of my favorite American filmmakers. And he's someone who, all of his films are about institutions and these insular worlds that have their own language, I think. And he just investigates them with such a degree of detail and duration too, that I felt I was looking for a folksy old voice to bring us into this world. And Fred's from Massachusetts. We were in similar circles in Boston for a while, so I had his email. And actually, originally, Fred was going to play the character Franny, and but he was in Paris at the time, and his doctor said, "Don't do that." He's like, and I'm honestly glad we did it. Cliff Blake is incredible as Franny, and we put him through some very late nights and cold temperatures. So later on in the editing process, I thought, okay, we could get back in touch with Fred. And I think to a certain viewer who knows his filmography, it's like a little bit of a cue to think about this film in that way, as a anthropological kind of study and not a narrative film in the traditional sense. So I think it's a nice little treat in that way. He's quite a voice. He only did a few takes of this, and he was nailing it, I thought.
And the other is Bill Spaceman Lee, Red sox Hall of Famer, himself a master of the Eephus pitch. Can you talk about bringing him in?
Is he here?
I don't know.
No. We were hoping he would show up. You can't pin that guy down. No way. So he was actually attached to this project very early on. I went on a rabbit hunt trying to find his email or phone number, asking different people who had worked with him in the past, even a line producer on Ken Burns' baseball. I was just really going down the rabbit hole. And then I looked up, I was like, I'm just going to look at the white pages. And there's his number right there. And so I just called it. Hey, buddy, what's up? How you doing? And he doesn't know who I am, but we start talking and really, really connecting, actually. And he's a hilarious person. I think to this day, he still doesn't know it's not a documentary about him. That's why I was really hoping he'd be here. Yeah. But yeah, he came on. I mean, he had this idea that he was going to come onto the shoot for one day and the movie was about him. But it really is in a way, actually.
It is.
So he came on and he pitched. We let him loose. We had a script. We wrote really good lines for him that he then botched or improved upon in some cases, I would say. And we chose the best ones. But he's a real natural. He's a real performer. That's just the way he is. He brought so much life to that set for a day, and everyone was getting his autograph. It was a blast.
Well, the movie is too, and congratulations to you and your great cast and crew. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for seeing this great movie, and see it again in March.